Hey nerds, Farmer Jesse here. Welcome to Growers Daily, your daily dose of ecological farming insight. It is Thursday, March 13th, 2025, and today we're going to talk about why certified organic seeds are important for organic systems, miracle grow and compost, farming in a very cold climate, and the term farm used outside of farming. So let's do it. All right, well, happy Thursday, everyone. I hope you all are doing well. I've been out in t-shirts these last few days, and it's been weird and glorious. I did go ahead and get some of our potato chunks in the ground this week, which I will talk about next week. I sowed some carrots and beets, gonna sow a bed of spinach, arugula, and radishes, and I think I will be planting those onions either today or tomorrow with the forecast as of right now. However, if it looks different by the end of the day or by tomorrow, I will probably change things up a bit, but nothing super cold coming for us just yet. I think I'm doing all right in the restraint and patience category, all things considered. I give it a B- this year. Anyway, it's Thursday, and as is currently the tradition, I'm going to answer 3 Patreon questions from our now over 900 current Patreon members, which is amazing. You all rock, and I literally could not do this show without you. So our first Patreon question du jour comes from Patreon member Sean Ueda, who writes, quote, "Hi Jesse, love your dad jokes, even though I don't have kids. Documentation I've read on hot composting to kill off pathogens says that the pile needs to maintain a minimum temperature of 131 degrees Fahrenheit for 3 to 4 days. Does the 3 to 4 days have to be contiguous, meaning is it 3 to 4 straight days, or can it be broken into 2 separate events because the pile got turned over in the middle of the over 135 degree temperatures? As for a quick turn, not tearing the pile down completely and reassembling the pile with outside in the middle and inside on outside, I just use a 4-inch diameter auger with 3-foot shaft and drill about 8 holes vertically onto the pile. And I should just, as an aside here, that's what I use for the holes when I'm burying the tomatoes that you've seen in clips. A couple people have asked about that. That's the same thing. And if I can find it on, I think we got it from Amazon. If I can find it there, I'll link it in the show notes. Anyway, Sean goes on. Then I close off the holes by raking some of the material on top over the hole. And yes, I do the outside in, inside out thing only 3 times and not 5. For kickstarting, since I don't completely adhere to organic standard and not so dogmatic about it, I'll sprinkle ammonium nitrate or sulfate. My local feed store was out, so I used Miracle Grow, the blue poison. Label said 24% nitrogen. Pile is sitting at just over 140 degrees Fahrenheit. I really have a lot of problems with organic standards. Why does a tiny seed such as celery or brassica seed need to be organic when the veg you harvest is literally 100 or 1,000 times bigger? Contamination of bad chemical covering the seeds is going to be well under ppm when you harvest your veggies. Your thoughts and thanks." End quote. Okay, so this is a really fun query, Sean, and definitely a lot to dive into. Okay, first, to your questions about pathogens and does the pile have to maintain those temperatures for 3 to 4 days in a row, or can it be turned in that period and still have the same effect? Yes, generally speaking, if you turn it in that 3-day period or whatever, and the pile continues to stay in that range between 131 and 170 degrees Fahrenheit, then you are good to go on the pathogen and weed seed front. Again, generally speaking, but that also depends on if you are needing to use it for certified organic purposes, which it sounds like you are not certified organic. In fact, the point of turning is to 1, keep it warm, and 2, mix the pile up so that every part of it gets a little bit of that heat on it to kill all the disease everywhere and the weed seeds. You still do, organic growers would still need to follow the organic guidelines if you are in fact certifying. If not, and you are not subject to FSMA regulations, then just make the best compost you can, however it makes sense for you. No rules against using an auger that I'm aware of, easier than shoveling, I would guess. Now, for the Miracle Grow thing, the blue coating of that stuff is copper sulfate, which is a fungicide, and there is a polymer involved in the slow release fertilizers that can basically become a microplastic, according to research, recent research out from the University of Memphis and the University of Missouri. So I might recommend avoiding that one for good compost, or just avoiding it in general. That's not the kind of stuff that you want in your garden or in your food. Nitrogen is often my challenge too here, so I hear you. For me, for kickstarting a pile, I typically use some grass clippings or some green plants soaked in water and shoved into the middle of the pile. Or like I said on Monday, soaked grains will do the trick nicely as well. Do chemicals you produce a crop or compost response? For sure. But they are also remarkably bad for the environment, both where they are produced and where they are used. I kind of think of it this way. We barely understand what microbes are doing or how plants feed themselves. In fact, rhizophagy is a huge part of plant nutrition, and it was only discovered in like 2008. So we should be hesitant to think we can do the jobs of microbes. Our job is rather to encourage and support their work, not do their work. So I'm not saying it won't make a good compost or that you can't grow good plants that way, just that there are perhaps healthier, safer ways to do it that enable the microbes to make the decisions and do their thing. At least that's how I look at it. To the last part of your question about why we need to worry about organic seeds when the contamination is low compared to the end product. Well, it's kind of the same answers I just gave about the compost, especially for nitrogen covered seeds. Some seeds are coated with antifungals, so that's not ideal for plant growth in general. I once ordered conventional tomato seeds from a place because everywhere else that I was looking for this particular seed, which I think was Jetstar tomato seed, that everybody else was out, and it came covered in a fungicide, so I couldn't use them. Perhaps needless to say, living soils and nutrient-dense plants need fungi. So also, organic seeds are bred for organic production. So they are typically bred and grown without chemical fertilizers and are thus able to better handle environments without those sort of products. Conventionally, chemically, produced seeds are not generally as capable of making the root associations required to barter for their own nutrients. Not saying they won't survive. Conventional seeds may just not thrive as much as organic seeds in a non-chemical organic-ish environment. They've been bred in a world where the macronutrients are abundant and they won't have to work for them. In a sense, maybe even of a proverbial one, conventional seeds are spoiled. They don't have to make those complicated relationships with microbes, so they're not used to it. And the research largely does back that up. I'll link a good review in the show notes if you want to read it. In fact, interestingly, a huge percentage of organic farmers still use conventional seed and may be missing out on production because of it. We stopped certifying our farm this year, but we are still using almost exclusively organic seed because the performance is likely to be better in our organic production system. Anyway, I hope that's helpful. Great question, and I look forward to hearing your all's thoughts on that. We're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, growing in a colder than cold climate, BRB. Today's episode of Growers Daily is brought to you by Harnwah Greenhouses. Harnwah Greenhouses has pioneered controlled environment agriculture since 1965, partnering with market gardeners and farmers across North America to deliver turnkey greenhouse solutions. Their unwavering mission is to support growers' success through innovation and expertise in design, manufacturing, and installation. Harnwah Greenhouses are engineered to withstand high wind and snow loads, providing optimal brightness, increased yields, rapid ROI, and long-lasting durability. With over 20,000 projects completed, they are more than a manufacturer. They are a trusted partner. Their structures foster sustainable, energy-efficient ecosystems that drive profitable, resilient agriculture. In 2025, Harnwah is introducing a new low-tech, high-tunnel model starting at just $2 per square foot, offering open field growers an accessible entry into controlled environment agriculture. Learn more at harnwah.com. That's HARNOIS.com. All right, back to the show. If you, the listener, are enjoying this content, getting even a small amount of value from it, consider supporting our work over at patreon.com/no-till-growers. I will try to get to questions from everywhere the questions come in, but I will always get to your Patreon questions. Now, today's second Patreon question comes from Patreon member Anna Stoika, who writes, quote, "Hi, Jesse, longtime listener, first-time poster. Firstly, thanks for the absolute wealth of information you put out every week. Secondly, a question. Would you consider talking at all about non-traditional market farming, i.e. vertical farming or precision agriculture? I'm from Northern Ontario, and our window for outdoor growth is not as optimal as that of other areas, but the need for food and heightened food security is just as critical. Technically still no-till, sweat, smile emoji," end quote. Okay, yeah, great question. And in fact, this crossed my mind a couple weeks back when we had the question from Joseph in Alaska. There are places where growing outside is all well and good, but the window is open for like such a short amount of time as to make any sort of successions or even long-term crop production or warm weather crop production really difficult, if not impossible. And I would love to at some point get up to see some of these remote colder climates and see them in the peak of their season, because I know for at least some of you, there's basically always a chance of frost, even in the dead of summer when the sun is barely going down, if at all. In fact, and this is a little off topic, but I remember watching that Werner Herzog documentary called Happy People, A Year in the Taiga, all about these people who lived in Siberia and how intense their years were, but how in the summer, despite like an unbelievable number of mosquitoes, but anyway, in the summer when the sun never went down, how prolific their gardens were because they basically just grew all day and all night for weeks. Anyway, back to your question. My take is to grow food however it makes sense for you. If you can use and maintain, especially given the heavy snow loads, high tunnels for early spring and late summer production, that would be ideal. But if all you have space and potential for is something like a vertical farm or a hydroponics operation, then I say do it if it will bring you some fresh veggies. Hopefully as a supplement to what can be grown in the field there. But yeah, don't be dogmatic about it. Whatever you can grow, if you can grow food at all, grow it. Now that term precision agriculture is typically something I associate with just really precise chemical agriculture. So like using GPS data and heat maps, et cetera, to show exact locations of pests or disease outbreaks so as to reduce the use of and need for chemical herbicides, pesticides, and potentially fertilizers. Certainly when compared to broad spectrum uses of synthetic chemicals that just treats the entire field prophylactically, I prefer precision agriculture. Again, whatever makes the most sense in your region is the healthiest for your soil and self, I say is fair game. Obviously, there are growers in Northern Ontario in that 50 plus degree latitude range that are growing organically. So the options and opportunities exist to produce a lot of food for sure, but they require a deep understanding of the climate and the soils, plus a decent amount of well-built covered space to get things started earlier and keep them growing late into the fall. Every climate and region has its advantages and disadvantages for sure. And especially if you are seeking out regionally adapted seeds, you may find that you can grow a lot of something we really struggle with down here, or more of something that you thought you struggled with. What that is, I can't really say, but because that is a very much a different climate from here in Kentucky, but hopefully some others from the area from colder climates in the comments will enlighten us with what they are able to produce and potentially store in those climates and those more intense cold climates with short seasons. Also, what sort of systems do you all find work best in those situations? Do you use vertical farming in those climates, hydroponics? How is field production there? How long is your season without a frost? Let me know. All right. I'm not sure if that was at all helpful, but I hope no one, especially in intense climates, feels discouraged to grow food because the system they have access to doesn't look like our system or any other organic no-tilly type farm. Try and be mindful of ecology, obviously, and your own health, but absolutely, just grow food. One last quick break, and then when we come back, do farms need farm teams? BRB. Today's episode of Growers Daily is brought to you by So Right Seeds. So Right Seeds is an heirloom seed company that offers fresh, high-quality, open-pollinated seeds. They have a great selection on their website of over 400 varieties, along with a planter's library with tips for growing. They offer cover crops and bulk packs of seed for sustainable home gardening. The instructions on the back of their packets have all the information you need to get started. Go to So Right Seeds, that's SOW, and use my discount code NOTILL for 15% off your order. That's SoRightSeeds.com. All right, enjoy the show. All right, so our last Patreon question of the day comes from Ricky Kennedy, who writes, quote, "Hi, Jesse. I liked your segment about what a farm is. I wonder what you think about the use of farm in sports, like a pro team's farm system. It seems to me that, at least in the U.S., more people think positively about a sports farm than a farm. Everyone roots for the homegrown soccer player who played in the pro team's youth program. Maybe it's local pride. Maybe it's that the language was borrowed when farms weren't some far away place run by a corporation. I'd love to hear your take on what a good farm system is like a good farm. Thanks." End quote. All right, now this is a Farmer Jesse kind of question if ever there was one. So let's examine the term farm and some of the ways it's used outside of farming and food. First, though, the words farm and farmer did not originate as agricultural words, really. According to Merriam-Webster, it comes from the French word ferme. Quote, the source of ferme is Anglo-French fermer, meaning to rent. That French verb is said to be based on medieval Latin firma, meaning fixed payment, and the Latin verb firmare, to make firm. In the mid-15th century, ferme was also used as a verb having the same meaning as its French source, end quote. In other words, to farm a piece of land meant to rent it, though there is some debate that it actually derives from different words that mean life or spirit or vitality, but because farm was literally used to mean rent land for a very long time, it's safe enough to assume that it is the dominant etymology, and the other definitions are nice, but perhaps a bit of a feel-good stretch. Indeed, for a time, the term farmer actually meant debt collector, but not that much later, the term farm and farmer, those were used more broadly to refer to agricultural use of land, regardless of whether you were renting it or owned it or whatever. Interestingly, however, it is this tie-in with leasing out land that you arrive at the use of the term farm to mean a person or business who is employed to do a specific job, that is to say, to farm something out. The term farm also stands in for the production of something non-agricultural, like a solar farm. It's on farmland, obviously, but it's not raising food or textiles. It's collecting energy. Or the word farm is often employed with a somewhat negative connotation to describe industries that just pump something out thoughtlessly or in great numbers, like in a puppy farm, for instance. In sports, and namely in baseball, the term farm is actually used in kind of a relatively cool way. Farm teams and farm leagues are where a professional team sends the younger players, or sometimes the players who have been out for a long time injured, to develop them for the professional level. I wish we had a similar labor system for actual farms where people could go and train and get paid before moving off to start their own farms or to work on larger, more complex farms. I mean, there are apprenticeships and the like, but nothing really organized beyond just like finding a job. Few things that are actually developmental, like what they are doing up there at Green Acres, for instance, in Cincinnati with their training program that I did a whole video about last year. I'll link that in the show notes. Like the farm leagues in baseball are separate from the colleges. They are kind of their own thing. They train players to fit the system of the pro team they support. For farming, there is not enough support to get people ready, even in or especially in most schools, for running an actual farm. So maybe somewhat ironically, there is an idea there to develop a farm league of our own. I have no idea what that would look like, but that would be very cool. And I love that term homegrown as well. We, as people, sports fans, love it when someone from our shared experiences goes on to the big show. It's a worldwide thing, and you will even hear he's one of our own chants at Premier League matches in England for the soccer. Gotta love a homegrown. But anyway, thoughts on the term farm and how it's used? Sometimes, like in the case of server farms, I kind of feel like it's a confused usage. Like a solar farm is actually producing solar energy, but a server farm with thousands of computer servers is collecting and perhaps supporting data, but not so much producing stuff. I mean, maybe I'm wrong about that, but that doesn't seem to be its goal. That does not feel entirely analogous of basically anything in farming that I can think of, though perhaps the etymology of farm coming from a form of rent helps explain why its usage is so broad. Anyway, I think I'm going to wrap it up there for this Thursday. Don't forget we are now officially a 501c3 nonprofit, so donations are tax deductible and greatly appreciated. It helps keep our work going and growing. Huge shouts to Willie Breeding for the theme music and the team at No-Till Growers, including our longtime editor, Michael Sellis, who does freelance editorial work for podcasts and etc. in case you're looking for somebody to help you, I don't know, with a podcast or audio editing. Learn more at sellissoundworks.co. I'll link that in the show notes. Also, shouts to Epidemic Sound for the background music that you can hear. Pick up a copy of the Living Soil Handbook by me or The Seed Farmer by Dan Brisebois over at no-tillgrowers.com to support our work. Big thank you to everyone over at patreon.com/no-tillgrowers, where at a certain level, or if you just bump up from one level to another, or sign up in the month of March, you get a shout out on the show. So big shout outs today to Carson Christian. Ooh, that's a fun name to say. Guy Peled, Guy. I've got it in some combination there, I think. And Brian Newton. So what this is a group of, let's say, marine biologists who are studying narwhal in the Arctic Ocean. I think that's where narwhal live. And anyway, they're kind of near this huge ice shelf, and they see this this big black thing in the ice shelf, and it kind of looks like a fish. Like, I can sort of make out like a tail or something. And then all of a sudden, this big ice shelf breaks, and that piece containing the big black whatever object falls into the water, and it makes this huge splash, right? And it like rocks their boats, and then suddenly like all their communications go out, like just go dead. And then they they like kind of recover, and they're like looking around in the water, and they see the narwhal bolt, and they're like, whoa, what is that about? And then they look down and they see a giant figure swim underneath of them, and then they all kind of look at each other with that same, did we just see a giant mermaid look? And then our story begins. All right, have a great rest of your Thursday. We will see you tomorrow for Friday, for Feedback Friday. Make sure to get your feedback in. Otherwise, thanks for watching and or listening. Bye.